which value of x satisfies the equation 7/3 times the quantity x plus 9/28 equals 20? And then there are 4 answer choices. So what is this question asking us to find? Well, we see this phrase, which value of x satisfies the equation. So really all that's saying is, what is the solution? When we're looking for a value that satisfies an equation, we're really looking for a solution to the equation. So we have to solve this equation for x. So let's go ahead, and there's a few ways to do this. We'll look at some different approaches, and you pick the one that works best for you. So we have 7/3 times the quantity x plus 9/28 is equal to 20. So we'll call this method 1. So the first way you could approach it is by seeing that there is a fraction out in front of a quantity here, in front of parentheses, and getting rid of this fraction. And the one way to get rid of the fraction is by multiplying both sides by the reciprocal of that fraction. So we multiply each side by 3/7, and it's nice to put the 20 over a 1, so we have 2 fractions. And then we can say, well, 3 times 7 is 21. 7 times 3 is 21, which that's going to be 1, and that will get rid of the fraction. And x plus 9 over 28 is equal to, and then on this side here, we have 20 times 3, which is 60, divided by 1 times 7, which is 7. And this won't simplify, but that's okay. So 21 over 21 is just 1. X plus 9 over 28 is equal to 60 over 7. And we'll leave this because this doesn't do anything. We can't simplify that any further. And when we ever have 1 in front of a group of parentheses, we can just distribute the 1 through, which in effect allows us to drop the parentheses in a way. So we have x plus 9/28 is equal to 60 over 7. And at this point we have x plus some constant is equal to another constant. And in order to solve for x, we can subtract that constant from both sides of the equation. And that will remove that and give us 0. So we'll have x plus 0, or just x, is equal to 60 over 7 minus 9 over 28. And now we have some fraction fun, so we need to be able to simplify this. So we can do so by finding a common denominator, and I know that 7 and 28 have a common denominator of 28. That will work. So we can multiply this guy by 4 over 4. Oops. 240 over 28 minus 9 over 28, which gives us 231 over 28. All right, so there we go. And we can try to simplify that if we want, but if we look at our answer choices, since this is a multiple choice, we can see that the answers are given to us in decimal form, and this is in fraction form. And the easiest way to do that is to convert our fraction to a decimal. So let's pull up our trusty calculator, and let's go ahead and enter 231 and divide that by 28, and we'll get 8.25. And we can see right away that our answer is going to be answer choice number 1. But as you may have learned, it's always good to just check your answer. So if we got 8.25 and we want to make sure that 8.25 satisfies this equation, we can use our good habit of checking by substituting 8.25 in for x and seeing if this side of the equation, when we evaluate this side of the equation with x is 8.25, is equal to 20. So let's just do a quick check, just for good measure, to make sure our answer choice is correct. So we'll just substitute 8.25 in for x. We want to see. Notice I'm not solving this equation because I simply want to take this value here, the left side of this equation, and type it in. I'm going to just type it into a calculator and make sure it equals 20, because that will guarantee that we have the correct answer. So how can we type this all in? Well, let's do 7 divided by 3. And I see parentheses, 8.25 plus 9 over 28. And I'm going to close my parentheses, I'm going to hit enter, and I want the value to be 20. And it is. So this checks out. Our answer is correct. Okay? So if you're satisfied with that, you can stop the video. But there is another way that you could approach this, or lots of different ways you could approach this, but we'll look at just a couple. Here's another method, and it gets us to the same answer. So let's just take a look here at 7/3 times x plus 9 over 28 is equal to 20. So you may have learned, or you may have thought to yourself in method 1, hey, I always thought that you distribute first. Well, you don't have to distribute first. As we saw in method 1, you can get rid of the fraction first. But if you do want to distribute first, you can do that. So if you want to get rid of the parentheses by distributing the 7/3, you can distribute the 7/3 through the binomial and get 7/3 x plus 7/3 times 9 over 28 is 7 times 9 is 63 over 3 times 28, which is 84, I think, I hope, is equal to 20. And at this point, this just becomes, another equation with fractions and stuff like that. So we can get rid of our constant by subtracting 63/84 from both sides of the equation, which will give us 0 on this side. We'll just cross it out. We have 7/3 x is equal to, oh boy, I don't even want to deal with this. I gotta get this over 84, what a mess. So I'm just gonna leave it written like this. Because I know, at the end of the day, I need a decimal. So I'm just gonna not do this as a fraction because I can just type it into a calculator and get a decimal. And actually, why don't we just do that now? So we know 7/3 x is equal to, and you could, of course, get this over 84. You could times that by 84, get a huge number, get this ugly fraction. And that's, of course, fine. But since we are headed for a decimal, we'll go ahead and just simplify this a little bit by opening up our calculator. Oops, let's see what we're looking at. So we want to figure out what 20 minus 63/84 is equal to. 19.25. All right, that is much nicer. I'm just going to leave it like that. All right, and now at this point, we can multiply by 3/7, or we can multiply by 3 and then divide by 7. We'd give you the same answer. So let's just do a quick multiplication by the reciprocal. And that, of course, becomes 1 because it's 21 over 21. Gets us to the exact same point over here. So we just have like 1x is equal to whatever this is. 19.25 times 3/7. So let's do that. 19.25 times 3/7. And we get 8.25. That's nice. Oops. That is not intended to be a decimal there. So where's that? So we have 1x is equal to 8.25, which is, of course, x equals 8.25, which is the exact same answer we got in the other method. So those are just two methods to solve this equation, and there's lots of different ways you could really do this equation. You could start by changing all the fractions to decimals first, and then distributing, or you could turn everything to decimal and then divide out the first decimal out from the parentheses. Really, it's up to you what you want to do first, but these are two very, more, I guess you could say, popular approaches. Getting rid of the fraction because that makes it usually a little bit easier to work with, or distributing to get rid of the parentheses first. So those are two common ways to start an equation like this, but again, you can start it really however you want. All right, so we just saw two methods that involve solving the equation by hand. So we'll look at two more methods that both involve the use of technology, your graphing calculator, to help you answer this question. So we'll look at something that we'll just call method 3. And this is a technology-based solution method. So with this method, what we do is we look at our equation and we see, there's the left side of the equation and there's the right side of the equation. And we look at each of these sides as two different functions. So we'll think of this one as, just some function of x, and we'll think of this as some function of x. We'll call it f of x, g of x. It doesn't really matter. The idea is that this is some function, this is some function. And what we're trying to do is see where these two functions are equal. Now, if you recall with your graphing calculator, we can graph functions. So what we're going to do in order to find the x value, essentially where f of x is equal to g of x, which would be the solution to this equation, we're going to use our calculator here. And this is kind of neat. I'll bring it up and we're going to say, well, So find where two functions are equal. Well, we could graph the two functions and find where they intersect. That's essentially the same thing. So what we'll do is we're going to go to our graphing calculator. We're going to go to y equals to our grapher. And for y1, or f of x, our first function, we're going to type the left side of the equation. So we'll do 7/3 parentheses x, which is this button here, plus 9 divided by 28. Close our parentheses. And this is y1. So we're essentially setting the first function in our graphing calculator to the left side of the equation, which we're going to call f of x. And then in y2, we're going to set that to the right side of the equation, which we're going to call g of x, or y2. And we'll just type in 20, because that's all that is on that side. So if you look here, you might be thinking, well, if I graph this, this is going to be a line with some slope, 7/3, and this is also going to be a line with a slope of 0, or just a horizontal line. So we expect to see two lines on our graph, and so we'll graph those. And now what we'll do is, now that we have our two functions, we'll hit the graph button. Remember, the purpose here is to find where those two graphs intersect. And so it graphs, and here's our standard window, and you might think, well, I only see one graph, where's the other? Well, if you think about it, y equals 20, or that's going to be, this only goes up to 10, so your horizontal line's somewhere up here where you can't see it. So we're going to go to zoom, and we're going to go down to option 0, which is zoom fit. So hit the down button until we get to number 0. There we go, and hit enter. And this will zoom out a little bit and put the graphs so you can see them together. Okay, there we go. So there's the left side of our equation, this guy, so this function essentially. And then there's this guy here, the right side of our equation, or what we were calling g of x, or y2. And what we can do is, in order to find the solution to this equation, we can find the x value at which these two functions, or the left side and the y side, are the same, where they meet. And that's this guy right here. So here's the point of intersection. If we can just figure out what x value is down here, there's our solution. And, well, your graphing calculator do that really nicely. So we're going to calculate. So see this, here's the calculate menu. So we want to access the calculate menu, which is the blue. So we're going to hit second and then trace to go to our calculate menu. And we're going to calculate the intersection, number 5. So you can either hit the number 5 or just scroll down to number 5 and hit intersect. Now at this point, it's going to say first curve, just hit enter once, hit enter twice, and hit enter again. And it will calculate the point of intersection. It puts the cursor right there. You can see it. And if you look here, the intersection is x equals 8.25 and y equals 20. So there's the point of intersection, but essentially the x value that makes these two functions the same is at 8.25. And sure enough, there is our answer. There's our solution. So that's one way. That's a technology way to allow us to do this, thinking, like, using the idea that each of these two sides can be seen as two different functions that we're looking to see where they're the same, or the x value that makes them the same. All right, and method number 4, which we're also going to call a tech method. But this is your cheap method, and this one only works when you have multiple choice. And this method is basically just the substitute and check method. All right, and is what it basically says is the substitute and check method is really where you're just going to take each of the 4 answer choices and substitute them in for x to see which one satisfies the equation. So let me erase this real quick. And so just to show this method once more, we already saw it actually when we did it this way. This idea of checking, where you substitute the answer that you got in to see if it satisfies, is really all we're doing here. But instead of actually solving the equation all the way through, we start from our answer choices and just plug each one in to see which one satisfies the equation. That's why we call this a cheat method, because you don't actually have to do much, but it does get you the answer, especially if you're in a rush to finish the test or whatever. This is a quick way to get it done. And so the way that you would do this is by substituting each answer choice in just one at a time. And so we'll start with our first one, pretending that you didn't know that 1 was the answer. You just start at the beginning and go through. So we could do 7/3 parentheses x, and instead of x, we're substituting our first possible solution, plus 9/28, and then close parentheses, and we're going to hit enter to see if it equals 20, and if it does, it's the answer, and it does. So number 1 is the answer. We have confirmed using method 4, what we already know to be the case. But for the sake of illustration, if say when you hit enter, this wasn't 20, if it was something else, then that would mean this was not the solution, and you would move to the next one. And so we would then test the next one, 7/3, parentheses, and then 8.89 substituted in for x instead, plus 9/28. And we'd see right away that this does not equal 20, and therefore we could say this is not the solution because it does not satisfy this equation. It does not make it true. And similarly, you could do it again for the third one. I mean, at this point, it's not necessary, but you can see the purpose where you would just go through each one and just quick type them in and see which one gives you, oops, that didn't work out right, to see which one gives you the 20. And so again, this is not 20, this is not a solution. And 44.92 would, again, produce something that's not 20. And so by using method 4, which is the cheat method, that's why I saved it for last, because the other ones were so much better. But it gets you the answer. And again, it only works for multiple choice. If this were not a multiple choice and this were a short answer question, you would have to go through and choose one of these other methods here. Okay? So in summary, we looked at 4 different methods to answer this question about which value of x satisfies this equation. In other words, what's the solution? We saw 2 methods that were manual, essentially, and you actually did all the steps to solve the equation. The first one involved getting rid of the fraction first out in the front, and then managing the parentheses and working with your fractions. And method 2 involved getting rid of the parentheses first, and then managing the fractions. And again, we said that you're not limited to just these 2. You also could get rid of the fractions and convert these fractions to decimals first, and then distribute or whatever. There's a lot of different ways you could multiply by 3 on both sides, then divide by 7 as 2 different steps. Lots of ways you could have approached this. But these are the 2, I guess you could say, more popular methods, more direct methods to get to the solution. And then we saw 2 tech-based methods with your graphing calculator. Method 3 involved looking at each side of the equation as a separate function, graphing each of those functions as y1, y2, and finding where they intersect, or finding the x value where they intersect. And that x value is the solution to this equation. And then method 4, which is the cheat method. And it only works for multiple choice, but it's just to plug each one in. It's brute force, see which one works, and you get the answer that way as well.